Hello everybody, it's Joe Cioffi here. It's a Monday, March 26th, 2018, 6 o'clock Eastern Daylight Time, and I'm still not 100% recovered from late last week. I gotta tell you folks, it gets harder and harder to bounce back from this sort of stuff when you're working straight shifts and not getting any sleep at all, which is basically what happened to me last week. I'm not good when it comes to sleeping, either at my mom's house, which is nearby, or at a hotel. And either way, I just don't sleep very well. So I basically spent the weekend catching up on that, fighting off a cold, burning the inside of my lip and my mouth from eating pizza that was too hot and potatoes that were too hot. So yeah, I'm not exactly batting 1,000 at this point. But enough about me. I hope you folks had a great weekend. We are now looking ahead to the last days of March, and while here in the Northeast we are seeing that the weather is going out relatively calm, we don't have any big storms, some temperature fluctuations, and warm front, cold front thing that's going to be that we're going to be dealing with. However, we do have parts of the country that are problematic right now, and I'm going to jump right off the bat to some severe weather that is breaking out. We've had some severe weather during the month of March, but it hasn't been especially active because of the kind of storm systems that we've had and how they've evolved, mainly impacting the eastern part of the U.S. And we haven't had those cold, the cold air hasn't been dropping down into the plain states and setting up severe weather in the eastern plains and the middle Mississippi Valley. But we do have it tonight, and in fact, the Storm Prediction Center on their map from late this afternoon, the radar is underneath, the radar echoes are underneath the areas of severe weather being indicated by the Storm Prediction Center, and you actually can see an area of enhanced risk in a narrow band across west central Texas on northeastward into southwestern parts of Oklahoma, or that could be south central Oklahoma, with slight risk extending north and west east of there, and the marginal risk that runs into southeastern Kansas, southwestern Missouri on southward. And over the next couple of days, the severe weather risk is going to continue in much of the same area, gradually pushing its way a bit further to the east, given what is going on. I'm going to bring up a radar view. I'll get to one of the regional radar shots that I have, and we will get a better look. I just have to remember where I hit it. You know what? I'll just bring up the big U.S. view. That'll help, and we'll get as tight as we can and bring that up top. But you can see is a line of severe storms that is developing inside that enhanced risk area right now. You can see where those little red dots are. Those are some severe thunderstorms that are being indicated, and they're moving. Looks like the line in itself is expanding northeastward, and the cells are moving northeastward as well. We also have some heavy rains and a couple of embedded thunderstorms in the mix that have developed across northeastern most Missouri, in through central and southern Illinois, and heading into Indiana in time. But this is not going to be, I don't think these cells are going to evolve into severe weather. And then up to the north, we have snow going on over in the upper Mississippi Valley and in the upper Midwest, as this next storm system, such as it is, begins to translate its way eastward. Meanwhile, here back home, we'll show you that it was a really beautiful day as we look, at least my home anyway, I'm sorry. But one of the things that is going on is that we've got this big gale center. You can't really see it too well here, but it's actually off the frame. But there is a very powerful storm that developed northeast of Bermuda, and that has brought down some very cold, dry air from eastern Canada southward through New England and upstate New York and down into the mid-Atlantic states. You can see how clear it is. And by the way, where you see the white across western and central New York and on up through New England and over and into Maine and into parts of Massachusetts and in western Mass and a little patch in northern New Jersey, that is not cloud cover. That is actually snow cover. The same holds true for what you see across southern Pennsylvania. That is all snow cover there. In areas just south of that, much of the snowfall has melted away already. So it'll, in time, what you see in the inland areas will also disappear, but you can see the remnants of that late season snowfall from last Wednesday still apparent on the satellite pictures, particularly the area down in southern Pennsylvania, which spent much of the winter in a snow hole, and they made it up big time with this particular storm. So all in all, that gale center out to the east at least ensured us of dry weather here, and not a fifth nor'easter, as that has moved well on out. That was that system from Saturday that passed across the Midwest and the lower Ohio Valley and went out well out to the southeast off the Carolinas. Now here is the warnings and watches that we have of the salmon area, or pink, whatever that color is, fuchsia. That is severe thunderstorm watches that are up tonight in that whole area of enhanced risk. We have a larger area where a flood watch is in effect from northeastern Texas northeastward into central Illinois and into central Indiana, where we're seeing some of that heavier rain on the radar. Excuse me. And just north and west of there in the red, that small area of red north and west of St. Louis in Missouri, we've got some flash flood and flood warnings up. Meanwhile, winter weather advisories up for central and northern Minnesota and parts of southeastern North Dakota. Out in the west, a narrow band of winter weather advisories in the mountains of western Washington, but much of the west coast, except for the odd wind advisories that you see here, basically dry and calm as we move through this week. Now, where are we going with all of this with regards to the weather as we head into April? Well, I got to tell you, I'm going to bring up one of the maps that I drew for a website post I just did, and this is what the European is showing us for the upper air for next Tuesday. And we have some not exactly blocking per se. I mean, not the kind of blocking that with regards to what goes on in the North Atlantic, but what we do have is, let me see if I can get this to interact so I can draw on it. Apparently not. Oh, I remember now. Got to remember this. Okay, but if you look up across the polar regions here, you've got two areas of interest that I'm going to show you here. One is this right in here. We've got this upper high that is building up across the Bering, just west of the Bering Sea and on up into the polar regions. And at the same time, you have mainly higher than average pressures all across the polar regions, the polar region from Russia right over the North Pole back to Greenland. This is what it's doing is it basically is displacing the vortex further south than it otherwise would be, and you actually have a very wrapped up deep vortex that settles in south central Canada. So that creates a flow of cold air from northern Canada, and that cold air moves southward into the Midwest and eventually into the eastern United States. You also have a bit of a split flow here. There's energy that is trying to come in from the Pacific. There's nothing from the standpoint of strong shortwave troughs. We really don't see too much here. But one of the things I'm going to look for next week is whether there's going to be some energy in that northern jet that's going to come down and around and try to dig. This vortex is going to attempt to work its way eastward over time. And what could happen as that vortex moves eastward is that there might be an arm of some sort, maybe back through here where I just drew in that brownish color. That there might be a trough as the vortex pulls out, a trough that digs down and around, and that might create something. Whether it does or not remains to be seen. I'm not. The European does show something specific for the first part of next week, but it's too far out into the long range to get too involved and too wrapped up in it. The other models are showing some slight signals with that. We're at the time of year now, especially once we go into the month of April, as far as snow is concerned, particularly for the coastal northeast, and not so much for the inland areas, but even here too it could be problematic. But for the coastal areas of the northeast down into the northern mid-Atlantic, it's got to be perfect in terms of the setup. You got to have just the right amount of cold air. You've got to have the bulk of the event fall at night because of the lengthening days and the strengthening, the sun angle strengthening even further. Sun is as strong now as it is in the middle part of September, and before too long, when we get into next week, it'll be as strong as it is in the early part of September. If you can get a sunburn in early September, you can get a sunburn now of equal magnitude. So, we're talking about a powerful, sun here, and that really reduces the chance for accumulation during the day unless it were to snow very hard. And again, we're only speaking in theory at this point. We've got a long way to go. We got to get there first. But overall, we are looking at a pattern that would mean that temperatures next week will be on the order of 10 or more degrees below average. That's a pretty sizable departure for the early part of May. Might even be as much as 15 degrees below average. So we'll just have to see how that all winds up playing out as this mess that we are dealing with evolves. But we can actually bring up the climate models if it lets me. We'll look at the climate models today, and look at the weekly temperature departures here going into the month of April. So starting with the week what we're in now and ending on Monday, April 2nd, you can see that it's basically above average in much of the eastern states. And that actually, we're not above average now, obviously, but for that matter tomorrow, but starting Wednesday and particularly Thursday into Friday, we're going to see above normal departures. And also remember, by the way, this time of year, temperatures can get into the 60s very easily. It's almost reflexive in terms of temperatures climbing up into the 60s this time of year with even a reasonable air mass if it's not overly cold. Average is middle to upper 50s, but 60-degree days become more and more common as you run into the first 10 days of April. So we are going to see that again here, some places Wednesday, and in some places Wednesday and Thursday and Friday as well. But when we go to here's that first week. Now here's the second week, and you can see that a large part of the Rockies, the northern Rockies, the plains down into Texas, and then eastward across the mid-Atlantic states and into the Northeast, either below average as a whole. Again, this encompasses the whole period from April 2nd to April 9th. And so that's the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 7 days. So you could have, one or two, that you certainly could have a couple of the days in this stretch being above normal, which will be offset by a couple of days that'll probably be well below normal. And here's the week from the 9th to the 16th. So the cold seems to it gets relieved somewhat, so that this first week of April looks challenging from the standpoint of cold. And then we're seeing on the climate models anyway, the last week of April and the first week of May showing colder than average temperatures as a whole across the eastern part of the United States. So the last several years have been marked by rather chilly springs in the Northeast and northern mid-Atlantic. So it seems as if this trend is continuing this spring. So let's back off to the GFS. And by the way, I just switched. This is Sunday, Easter Sunday, in terms of the temperature anomaly that's being indicated at 2 in the afternoon. So you can see that a large chunk of the Northeast and mid-Atlantic showing below average temperatures, and much below in the southern plains and on up through the middle Mississippi Valley, and then also much below normal northern plains back up into Canada. And then as we go into next week, if it will let me, apparently not. So I will, because that's as far out as we have on the new run. So you know what? Let's back off and let's go to what's happening at the present time, and start with tonight. The low that's coming out of the southern plains. It's not a well-developed system. You've got the big high sitting in New Brunswick. You've got the You can see the edge of that gale center that's northeast of Bermuda, so all that dry air gets funneled down the eastern seaboard, and breezy conditions with a northeast wind from the south, from the mid-Atlantic, the southern mid-Atlantic states down into Florida. Rain and snow up in the northwest, some snow up in the northern plains. So that warm air comes eastward, and they'll probably bring in some showers here late Tuesday night into Wednesday. Could see an outbreak of severe weather late Tuesday and Tuesday night, this time shifting into Arkansas, southern Missouri, and still extending back down into Texas. So you can see it fires up some pretty hefty thunderstorms Tuesday night into Wednesday morning in northeastern Texas and southwestern Arkansas. Not too much happening at the west at this point. Some snow, some scattered snows up in the Rockies, but we'll make that transition over into a milder air mass. A warm front's going to try to push through. Low pressure eventually comes out of all of this and heads up into Ohio and western New York. We'll get some showers with that here in the east Thursday night into Friday, first part of Friday, and then a shot of dry, chilly air for Saturday. Another front makes its way eastward here for Easter Sunday, where we're actually seeing the front on the GFS anyway coming through with a little bit of snow on the cold side of it. I don't know how real this is. The model looks flatter than what the other models are doing, which is taking a low further west, much like what the one for Thursday shows this up for Sunday. So I don't know if the GFS is onto something with this. And you know what? 9 times out of 10, you don't see changeovers to snow like this. But you know what? We'll take it as it comes. And again, this is as far out as the GFS goes at this point. Now, I'll show you just really fast. We'll go to the European, and it really isn't. See, here's the Europeans' view of Sunday. It's got the front where this is Saturday, by the way. The front from Friday is through, and a wave develops on it, but it actually has the next front back near Chicago with another low into the southern plains, and it would bring precipitation here in the form of some rain showers Sunday night into Monday, before it turns colder. Another front sets up for Tuesday. I can see it here, right here on Tuesday morning, up into the Great Lakes and Northern Plains, and then that swings on through here Tuesday night with a reinforcing shot of chilly air, and then you start to get some energy coming around, which has a low in southern West Virginia with probably some kind of secondary, at least that's the way the model is drawing this, cold air wrapped around it. So the European, it's done this for a couple of runs, is onto this idea. Whether it's real or not remains to be seen. The big question is going to be the upper air, obviously, and one of the things the European does is, you can see it here on day 10, it has a fairly good fairly strong short wave coming into the western lakes. The thing is if we carry this along, if the flow is progressive enough, it would just probably push a system out across the southern mid-Atlantic, the middle and southern part of the mid-Atlantic states, rather than lift something up to the northeast, unless you get something to dig here. So that's the big question. And the GFS's upper air, as we'll pull it up, is so much different than the Europeans. This not going out far enough, but if I go back one run, and it has a colder look, but it's not nearly as cold as the European is. If we switch back to the European has a oh, I'm sorry, I made a mistake there. Let me go back 12. I switched the model onto itself. So this is the old European GFS 216. If we go to the European's upper air, you see how different it is across in the east. It's got a very deep cold vortex in southeastern Canada. The GFS doesn't have this, and back into the upper parts of the Midwest is that next shortwave arm that's coming around. So we're gonna pay attention to this to see which model seems to have the upper hand regarding that particular event. Is it real? Is it not real? We don't know. But look, this time of year, just to remind everybody now, and the difference between getting snow in the first 2 weeks of March and the last 2 weeks of March is big. the difference from the last 2 weeks of March to the first 2 weeks of April is even bigger. So if it's going to happen, it's got to be a perfect setup. It's got to have plenty of cold air around to tap into, and ideally for it accumulating snow, if that's what you want to see, it's got to happen at night, because unless it's snowing really, really hard in the daytime, it's going to have a real tough time accumulating against what is now a very imposing sun angle. Let's take a look at what's happening in Europe, as we have seen some slight model changes as we're getting waves of rain. Now, there actually is a cold push of air that is going to be coming from Siberia across Scandinavia late in the week and into Easter weekend. And the GFS actually brings in a fairly strong storm into northwestern France and south of the English Channel before it drops southward. There is a bit of a cold flow here going into Saturday and for Easter Sunday, but the model seems to have backed off. The flow isn't especially strong off the North Sea, so the snow showers that normally would be produced in a situation like this, the models are kind of minimizing that at this point. But we'll see if that is the case. It wouldn't be a big surprise because of the fact that, again, you start to get into April, weather systems begin to change character a little bit as we move into the spring. But it does have another one of these Atlantic storms early next week off the coast of Ireland and Portugal, bringing in some waves of rain here, say later Easter Sunday night into Monday. That's not a half bad low in terms of strength. A 977 low sitting southeast of Ireland, well east of the coast of France. So the Atlantic Ocean storms are maybe players going forward on and off over the next couple of weeks in Western Europe and in the British Isles. But the chances for snow now, of course, diminishing as we move through time. So that pretty much covers it as far as where the weather has been. I'm going to come back to you guys now on board. We've got a nice crowd tonight. Good to see all the regulars here. And if you are new to my YouTube channel, welcome aboard. Do subscribe to it. It's absolutely free. You can set up notifications so that you can get you'll know when new videos come up, which is at least once a day. And of course, in storm situations, I tend to do stream videos twice a day, and sometimes on the occasion even 3 times. Kevin Francis, construction worker, very well. Springs in New York City are mostly cold. That is correct, especially the first half, and autumn is much nicer. One of the things over the last number of years that's happened is that the springs have it's almost as if winter has kind of extended itself into the first 4 or 5 weeks of spring, and the summer has extended itself into the first 4 weeks or so of 4 or 5 weeks or so of autumn. But definitely the autumn is a much better time to be outside than it is this time of year. The ocean is so cold that you get any kind of south wind, and you're going to have any kind of south wind or a wind off the ocean. In this case today, we've got northeast winds coming into southern New England and down through the mid-Atlantic states, so that's bringing in some rather chilly air. Salem Surveying, thank you so much for hitting Super Chat tonight. Really, really appreciate it. That's a cigar for me, and I thank you very much. William Perez is in Puerto Rico. Nice and warm. I have to say, I am really the extended cold weather, particularly this weekend. For some reason, the cold with the wind was kind of biting down to the bone, and I really want it to go away. Mirtha Gunter, keep us appraised of what happens. You got 3 inches there in western North Carolina. You've had quite a winter there with variable conditions, but you've had your fair share of snow. And by the way, that storm from late last week put just about everybody in the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic states that got snow this winter in well into above normal category. A lot of the area was above normal, but there were a few snow holes here and there Well, those snow holes were closed up, particularly in south central Pennsylvania and north central Maryland. Just running through, yeah, for snow lovers, all the cold air around. I know you guys want snow with it too, but it's kind of getting long in the tooth here, as far as the winter is concerned. At least that's the way I'm seeing it, Cullen. I really do want it to go away at this point. And Shelly Man Studios doesn't want it to snow anymore either. Dio Namkumar is on tonight. Good to see you. Shelter Island cold this morning, starting to warm up, but the wind turned to the east. It goes right through you. I know. I felt it out there this morning with that northeast wind. Northeast winds are always a problem along coastal areas of the Northeast, but particularly in the spring months, it can be just absolutely ridiculous. You're sitting looking at temperatures in inland New Jersey and in eastern Pennsylvania could easily be in the 60s and 70s, and I'll be sitting in the 40s with low clouds and fog. I don't like the spring where I am. The spring season is not fun. Jay Heidzik, I hope I said that correctly. Best perch fishing is great in the Chesapeake Bay. Water temperatures at 44. Yeah, I mean, at least soon enough, going into April, be able to start to do some fishing outdoors, although bass is restricted where I am until the freshwater bass, at least through the breeding season. So I may have to be a bit more patient. But if it's going to be cold like this, I probably won't get the opportunity to do much in the way of fishing. And yep, soon enough, pollen season is coming. The one thing the cold weather does do is that when the spring blooms come, it tends to prolong those blooms, making for very long flowering seasons, which is quite pretty and quite nice. But if you suffer from pollen, it can be really problematic. All right, folks, let me call it a night at this point. I hope everybody had a great weekend. We will be back 6 o'clock Eastern time tomorrow, 9:15 tonight. If Joe Rayo is up to it, because we were, both wiped out from last week and still in slow recovery mode. But we'll attempt the Joe and Joe show at 9:15 Eastern time on Facebook. And thankfully, there are no noreasters to look for and no real serious issues to worry about regarding the weather in the Northeast. So that's a good thing. But we'll talk about the Passover Easter weekend and the weather setting up for next week, and see if we can get more clues from the late afternoon GFS model. All right, folks, Facebook posts, plenty of them there. Website posts on meteorologistjoecioffi.com, Angry Ben on nycweathernow.com, and Long Island Weather on weatherlongisland.com. Have a great rest of your Monday. We will see you tomorrow.